back to the class, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Krayt Dragon raid once again, but this time we're going to be talking a little bit more from our area of expertise, and that is roster building. So why are we making this now? Why is this important? As of yesterday, CG just announced that from now on, and this is different than it's been before, they're kind of nerfing or changing it to be the way they always wanted it to be. They're making it so that you can only take 5 teams against the Krayt Dragon raid. Not to say that they're eliminating the characters, but you can only have 5 total attempts. And what this is going to do, differently from what we've been doing before, is you can't just build up every single character from the factions they've given us and go in and throw it in and get your best scores. We actually have to narrow down what are the 5 best teams that can actually be built to go into this, because everyone else who's not really in these teams, we should not be building them up, or at least we shouldn't be building them up with the Krayt Dragon raid in mind. That being said, we're going to be going through and we're going to be looking at an order of highest importance to lowest importance, what those teams are, what 5 you should be going after, what teams you can kind of do in the meantime. And one of the ways this analysis is going to work isn't just for how good the team is in the raid, that is going to be pretty much the main point, but it's also going to be how useful are these characters outside the raid, because ultimately that's what it's going to come down to when we look at roster building. We're never looking for one bang for the buck. We're looking for the biggest bang for the buck, where a character can use in multiple game modes, or at least multiple scenarios where you're going to get the most value out of farming them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start off with Cartel. We are going to be using a little bit of footage actually in this. I will say the footage is not mine. As you can see from the screen, I don't really have max characters, and really to get a full view of what this is supposed to look like, we really do need to be looking at what we're aiming at in the long term. Like, I'm not going to stop at R7 for my Cartel. So we do have some footage here. I will link all this down below. Again, it's not mine. It was actually provided to me from the Krayt Dragon Discord. It wasn't provided directly with me, but it's on there. I'll link the Discord as well, because they have a lot of really good info that involves these videos and how they're being used, as well as some other ones that are currently unlisted that I haven't included because they're unlisted, but they're on there. So why are the Hut Cartel important? Number one, from a roster building perspective, this is the only galactic legend that we have in the entirety of the factions that are allowed. So that alone really kind of pushes it to the front. On top of that, the faction or team is just really stinking good in the raid. They are one of the only ones that can max the score at an R8 or even R7 or R5 levels easily. You don't have to put a lot of effort into it. In fact, there's a number of ways you can do it that allow you to be flexible. If you're willing to put on the Raid Omicron on Boosh, you can actually 4-man it, or if you're Skeltrix, you can 3-man it with just Boba and Jabba. You can see in this video here, Cad Bane is being used as 5th, which is, you know, a lot less desirable than, say, Boba. Or you can, like we said, undersize it or just bring in another 5th. So you have a ton of options as to who you can use, when you can use them, how you use them, and still get the max score with really very, very minimal attempts into it. So overall, they have to come out at first. From a roster building perspective, again, Jabba isn't just good here. Really, his team isn't just good here. They are amazing in GAC as well as Territory Wars. They've been quite important for a lot of the specific conquests as well as TB battles. So yeah, this really is just no contest. We're going to see they're going to get to their max score there, or we're not going to see, but they do get to their max score there. So that's why they're number one. Number 2 is going to be the Mandalorians. This probably shouldn't be that much of a surprise to anyone. And I do have to make kind of a clarification why the Mandalorians are beating out the Tuscans. Spoiler alert, both these teams are capable of max score, of hitting that limit of 2,700,000 or whatever it is. They can get all the way there. Both of them can. The big difference between the two is the Mandalorians team is going to do more for a roster that is trying to be built up and trying to cover holes in a ton of different areas. The Tuscans are okay as a PvP team. They don't really have a lot of viability outside of that. I guess they're kind of relevant in the current conquest, but from, you know, a perspective of trying to plan things out, that's not really super relevant. And they really mostly shine in 3v3, but even then, you're going to be required to do Omicrons or things that you wouldn't already be doing here. So they're not bad, but this is better. Bo-Katan is required for JMK at a minimum of R5. The Mandalorian is essential to the Executor fleet, as well as beating are using Fennec to beat Lord Vader in 5v5 or 3v3. Armor is really important for any Galactic Legend that needs her. Specifically, C is probably the biggest one right now, especially if you're doing anything with Watt and Trench. Armor is a must for that team, or even if you're not, there are some teams that she just has to be present. Also not bad with SLKR. And then Maul himself, I mean, this whole team doesn't exist. Like, Mandalorians did not really exist before Maul. I realized the faction itself did, but they really weren't all that good. They weren't doing anything impressive. And with Maul, they do a lot of really impressive things with or without a Datacron. And he's also the most important side for Lord Vader. Canderous, okay. Really, I can't. Actually, Canderous is really the only one I can't talk up. Very important for the Maul team if you have it, but if your Maul's on Lord Vader, then Canderous, more than often not, just doesn't go anywhere. But the other four are very important in multiple game modes, and they really kind of beat Tuscans out from that perspective. But that being said, when it comes to the actual raid, they're both capable of doing really cool things. So if we pull them up, again, not my footage. This is going to be linked in the bottom so that you can check it out. There is voiceover for some of these, not all of them, but just seeing what this team is actually capable of getting into that max score territory. And I know this is probably going to be a little bit more relevant for people now, because when the raid first came out, it was actually very awkwardly enough, Bamley, there was a glitch in the game where he was actually allowing people to kind of get max scores with the way he was doing it. And that's not really relevant now. That got fixed. Now we really do need to be using Maul lead. And actually, this team isn't super flexible. You really need to have both. You need to really have both Bam and Canderous. You can see that this is actually a little bit different than what we were suggesting kind of on our leaderboard there, where they're using Django instead of armor. That is an option that you can flex out, but Canderous and Bam are really necessary here, so you have a little bit of flexibility with the last two. I guess you could even this team actually here might even be a really good argument too, because Django is needed at R7 already for the for JMK's event. So we can obviously get to our max score there. That team does really stinking well. So next up is going to be the Tuscans, and this one is really going to be something that we're all going to have to work on. As you can see, I myself do not have them down. I don't even have Tuscan Chieftain 5 stars, which means I haven't even attempted with this. I have no experience here. But what we can see with their scores, the fight is quite a bit more nuanced and mod reliant than especially the top two teams are. But the max score is actually still achievable with them if you are doing everything correctly. Here's our video footage for this one. I believe this is actually Overcast. I want to say an opponent that we had actually fought in GAC super recently. So he goes in with his run here with all the Tuscans. These are R8. All of these have to kind of be R8 just because that's where the damage threshold is. But most of these, and actually this is important to note, most of these will always get their max score for whatever tier they're trying. Really, the big exception for this is going to be Tuscans. Tuscans gain some really neat bonuses, I believe, around the R7, R8 tier that make them difficult, like really difficult to use at lower tiers. I've had a lot of people be really disappointed with their 5 stars in the first tier or even their gear 12s in the next tier, just not being able to hit those max scores because they're missing out on some bonuses that actually don't come in until on some of the later tiers. But again, their overall viability is here. They are pretty decent in PvP. Again, not as much, or they're not delivering quite as much as our good friends, the Mandalorians are, but they still have something to offer here. As you can see, they're able to get a pretty good score towards the end of this, flashing through it. It is a rather long video because the person who's doing is really thinking through all the actions they're doing. But other than that, that really is it for the Tuscans. There's not a whole lot else that we can say about them. They have a little bit of use outside of this, but ultimately they really were developed for the raid. So if you're really trying to max out your score, that's the way you want to go. So the next few teams we don't really have footage of. They do exist on the Krayt Discord that I mentioned before, but again, they're unlisted videos, so I don't know if I really have permission to share them through this avenue. But if you want to go and check it out, it will be in the description below. Next up is going to be Old Republic. This is a little bit sad. You're not going to want to use Karth here. The massive damage is going to be coming from this squad here with Jedi Knight Revan, Jolie, Bas-Lashan, as well as Mission and Zalbar. And pretty much what this means, and this is going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the video, the fact that you can only use 5 teams means that you really don't want to be building up Karth right now. You don't want to be building up Karth or T3 or Sortie. Even Juhani isn't really in the mix. I will say, if you don't have Mission and Zalbar and you're like, I'm never doing that, that's not for me, then yeah, Juhani actually does work as a 5th really, really well here, or even a 4th really, really well here. But if you're going for the ultimate team, this is kind of what it needs to be. I don't believe we have any like videos showing this team hitting the actual max score, but they're getting pretty close. They're getting to 2,200,000 or something like that on a really stinking good attempt. So they are the next team to really be working on. And again, going back from a roster building perspective, Jedi Knight Revan, Jolie, and Bastila Shad have not really fallen off the meta in any way, shape, or form, either on their kind of old Republic team with Grandmaster Yoda, or even with Jedi Master Luke or Jedi Knight Revan or not Jedi Revan, Jedi Knight Luke being used in some capacity in that way. So they're very much still on there. These guys are a little bit more expensive. Zalbar really isn't all that bad as a universal tank, and I guess both of them can even be used on the new Tuscan team, again, if that's something that you're currently working on. So they come in at a pretty easy 4th, and then the 5th, this one looks like it's going to be Jawas. Jawas, they've been having a hard time getting anywhere near close to the max score. That being said, they're doing it better than pretty much everyone else out there right now. I'm really hesitant to tell people to build these up. Really focus on these first 4 if you're really devoted to the raid. You really wanted to cap out on your max personal rewards. That's definitely where most of the bang for your buck is going to be. And then if you really get to the end and you're wanting something better, maybe it'll be different by then. But right now, it really does look like Jawas are in the weed, or they're in the lead as far as that goes. So something to look forward to, I guess. But right now, I'm only going to take them to gear 12, and then I'll get kind of a measly score with them. But another team, and now these next teams are really just going to be the teams that we do in the meantime, before you have, say, Jawas or Tuscans developed. And this is very much my case too. Like I can't even use Tuscans, so this team really isn't relevant for me at all. But this team, I really thinking like, not a top 5 team. I know that's the name of the video, but this is something that I'm using in the meantime, which is Bounty Hunters. And you can very easily build this team without taking away from your prime Hutt Cartel team and your prime Mandalorian team. And it's a legitimate leftover Bounty Hunter team under Jango lead, which as long as you can land a debuff with him in the very beginning of the match against the Krayt Dragon, getting contract really isn't that hard. The turn meter is really nice. There's a decent amount of damage here. The Hutt Cartel at the bottom, at the very worst, they're just there to constantly have everyone dispelled by hitting the bombs. So overall, again, not a top 5 team, but this is a great team to use in the meantime. And yeah, Karth, I mean, if you have these guys leveled up, go ahead and use them for whatever your piddly score needs to be. If you don't have Jabba, or if you don't have Maul, or if you don't have Tuscans, it's just most people out there have like a gear 11, gear 12 Karth just because of Malik, so it's a team that you can push on. I would recommend putting in at least one Hutt Cartel in there. It can be Gam, it can be Scando, doesn't really matter. Just you have someone to constantly cleanse the team as things come around. So that is going to be it. Let me know in the comments what experiences you're having, what scores are out there, what teams are really struggling with, and maybe some potential uses for Jawas that are in other game modes. I know they do a few things in PvP. I have not been impressed by them just because there's like 10 other teams can do it but better. So until the next time, thank you guys for watching and stay awesome.